Welcome to the Renaissance Woodworker. I'm your host, Shannon Rogers, and welcome to Woodworkers Safety Week 2012. I posted something on my blog earlier this week with a bunch of links to Safety Week posts for the last 4 years. And when Safety Week 2012 rolled around again, I began to think, geez, what haven't I already covered? And, you know, not just myself, but amongst the legions of other bloggers that have put out safety posts and tips and horror stories and things like that. And it began to be really difficult to think about how I'm not going to repeat myself. You've all heard about safe usage of routers and table saws. You've heard that hand tools can be just as dangerous as power tools, and proper ways to handle chisels and ways that you need to worry about even the dust from hand tools. I've covered all these things on my blog, and they've been covered umpteen times by other bloggers. But here's the thing. The last year saw what I think actually is the most serious accident I've ever had in the shop. I've experienced kickback once. I posted a blog on that, produced kind of a nasty bruise. I experienced, well, I guess another instance of kickback on the table saw that caused a block to hit me in the face. Fortunately, safety goggles protected me, but it was a big scare. But those are all kind of minor. This past year, I cut myself so bad that I actually had to go and get a few stitches in my hand. I've got a nice scar on the heel of my hand to prove it, and I did that with a hand tool. So yes, obviously hand tools can be just as dangerous as power tools, but with all of this safety content that I've created, that I've read over the last, since Safety Week 2008, yet I still had the most serious accident this year. And ideally, I should be more experienced than I was in 2008 when we started this Safety Week thing. So what's the issue? And I began to think about, you know, all the safety tips that come to mind, all the things that I know about, and I know how to work safely, but am I working safely? And there's been a couple of times when I examined projects I built, and this tea caddy that I built for semester 2 of the hand tool school is what I was working on when I cut myself. So I've been hanging on to this footage. Hand tool school members, you've already seen this, but I've been hanging on to this footage for about 6 months now to show at Safety Week. You know, I'll be honest, there's not a whole lot of blood. That's one thing you can say about hand tools, is it leaves a very clean cut. But every time I watch it, I turn my eyes away a little bit. Don't do this. This must have been near the end of the shot. I'm not sure what I was thinking here. Don't ever saw into your hand, power tools or hand tools. Not good. This is the way it should be done. Hand behind the saw blade, holding it in place, sawing away from yourself. Ouch. That's all I can say. You know, and it was one of those things where I've actually still got some spots of blood on the floor from when that happened, because I obviously turned the camera off pretty quickly after that, and it really hadn't started bleeding, but then it started bleeding with, you know, a vengeance shortly after that. I had 2 stitches in my hand to clean that up. And, you know, kind of like Matt and Mark and I were talking about Wood Talk Online last week, you just want to kick yourself because it's the stupidest thing in the world. You watch that clip and you immediately think, what is this idiot doing sawing directly into his hand? So my first safety tip for those of us that work on our shops and like to take photos of our work or possibly blog and podcast about our work, getting the shot is never, ever that important. And that's exactly what I was doing in that clip. I was stupidly holding the piece in front of the saw so that the camera could shoot over my shoulder and get the detail of that shot. That's just plain stupid. So let's look at kind of a checklist of things. Every time you sit down to do a project, every time you enter the shop, and every time you leave the shop, follow this advice. Before you do anything in the shop, you want to assess the situation. You've got it, you're ready to cut into that joint. Take a deep breath, take a step back, and examine the path of the tool. In other words, the path of the sharp, pointy bits. If you're going to cut a tenon, you want to see where you're cutting. Where are the sharp points of the teeth going to cut, and where is your body? Make sure your body is completely out of the path. Then you want to assess that the piece you're cutting on is firmly clamped down to your bench, whatever it is, so that's not going to move. If the piece moves, then the line you need to follow moves, and that line that the sharp pointy bits move into might come in contact with your body. So you want to lock in these different variables and make them constants. I know that I'm going to cut along the top here and down this shoulder, so my hand cannot be in the way of those teeth. I want it to be down and out of the way. Even when I'm starting the cut, I'll bring my thumb to bear, but my thumb is pressed up against the plate, not down by the teeth. It's nowhere near the teeth. Now, you can, again, take a good deep breath, make sure that everything is set, and start cutting. Likewise, in working with a chisel, probably the biggest problem causers, injury causers in the shop. You want to clamp your work securely so it's not going to move. You want to look at the task. In this case, I want to pare away the shoulder. What's the direction of the sharp pointy bit? Well, it's heading down this way, so my hand can be nowhere on this side of the chisel. I want to bring my hand back behind the chisel, and I want to make my paring cuts nice and easy. Constantly examining the path of that chisel. My hand may be back here behind this piece, but if the chisel is moving this direction, even though there's a piece of cherry in between, my hand cannot be there. You may run into weak spots in the cherry. The piece may split off and the chisel may go right into your hand. You also don't want to have your hand anywhere below that chisel because it can always move down and stab into you. Keep your body, your hand, everything completely out of the path of that cut that you're making. The little things will really get us in trouble fast. So you want to practice this same mantra of take a deep breath, examine the path of the blade, make sure your work is securely fastened, take another deep breath, then start to work. Silly little things like laying in a marking knife line can get you in trouble because we skip over these things. I'll come in, I'll put my square in place, and I'll get ready to cut the line. And I say, okay, my finger's out of the way of the path of the blade, but what I'm not doing, I'm not securing my work. And here's the thing, it's a subtle little thing, but if I were to just press this square down, I'm pressing with my thumb, pressing the square up against the board and using my fingers to press the square down to the board, my knife comes across, these fingers here are awful close to the path of this blade. If for some reason the knife hits maybe a hard bit of grain, a knot, or an early or a late growth section, it can jump over that off of the square and come right into your finger. Because I, more often than not, have my fingers out and I'm kind of holding the board, securing the board to the bench with my hand, I end up getting my fingers closer to the path of the blade than I need to. So again, let's follow this. We know the path of the blade is going to run right along that square. Now, let's bring a bench hook to bear, secure the work. Then I can press the square in. I'm pressed up against the bench hook fence. I can move these fingers completely out of the way just with a thumb down here holding the square in place, and I can mark it out. And I'm much, much safer. And you know, it's rare that we think to secure our work when we're doing layout, but I'll tell you what, these marking knives, if they're kept sharp like they should be, they will cause a heck of a cut on your fingers. So you never ever want to charge into a particular task. You always want to assess that situation, determine the path of the blade, secure the work, take a deep breath, relax, and do the job. Never charge into it. Never be like Shop Dog. When you're in the shop, you don't ever want to get lazy. Clean up your workspace. When you finish sawing out a tenon, put your saw away in the saw till. When you finish doing some chopping, put your chisels off to the side and keep your space clear of the shavings you generate. Those shavings will very quickly pile up and cover up the very sharp tenon saw, or even worse, a very sharp chisel hidden underneath them. You never want to be lazy. A clean workspace is a safe workspace. Finish a task, Move those tools out of the way, set up for your next task. Don't be lazy like Shop Dog. Shop Dog, get up. Get up, Shop Dog. Don't be so lazy. Checklists before jumping into every task are one thing, but you need to maintain that focus while you continue to work. One of the beauties of hand tool work is that I can turn on the radio, I can chop away, I can do my sawing and listen to some great music. Well, how many times has the music you're listening to or the podcast or the movie on the TV gotten you in trouble? Medic! Turning up the radio and sawing and chopping is your God-given right as a hand tool woodworker. So don't be afraid to do it, just maintain your focus. If the song gets particularly awesome, set your tools down, and you know what? This time, it's okay to be like Shop Dog.